All right, in the last lesson, I gave you a tool to create your own little mini database, and we're not going to spend a huge amount of time going into databases other than to make you aware of what you can do with databases. Everything that you see with regards to the HTML class and the Young Programmers classes is all driven by databases. The lessons are in a database. When you create your assignment, it's in a database. Your scores are in a database, and all a database is a way of storing information beyond when the student is looking on the web. So you want to be able to create your assignment and save it. It gets stored into a database. I create lessons for the future. They get stored in a database. And in the next lesson, not today, but the next one, I'm going to show you how I take the information that we store in the database, whether it's code, whether it's video, whether it's text, how I then use that to generate a web page. But you've already kind of gotten started with this because you created elements, entering information into these forms, these inputs on the form, and then saved it, and then that generated, or you were able to go to a page where it generated an array. So think of an array as a table in a database, and in the array you specify, hold on, let me scroll down here, you specify different field names, right? I gave you specific field names. So field name here would be ID. That's a column. First name, column. Surname, column. Age, column. And then each of these rows is a record in the database. And John Jones has the ID of 1, first name John, surname Jones, and age of 35. And so if I want to generate an array from this table, then it would go through and it would be name ID colon 1, first name colon John, surname colon Jones, and then through JavaScript how to then take that information and generate a page. So but then the question is, right, how do we create those arrays in the first place? And I'm going to show you tomorrow or in a couple of lessons, how you insert information into the database. But for right now, the way you inserted information was through the form, and behind the scenes it just took that information and put it into the appropriate table in the database. Database is really just a collection of different tables, and then those tables, I can connect the tables to each other, so I can say show me all of the, never mind, I'm not going to worry about that right now. So what I'm going to show you very briefly is something called SQL, and that is called Structured or Standard Query Language, and it's very, very simple. When we're doing simple SQL statements, it's very simple. We're just telling the database which records to give us. So let's say that our data is stored in a table called hit tracking, and I've assigned all the elements that you created in your mini database with a type. And a type would be one of the columns here called type of 201576. I just made up that number. And then another column is your student ID. So I have every element that every student has created in here, but I have one column that says student ID. So all of your elements have one ID and all of everybody else's elements have another ID. Well, you want to only get your elements. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a statement that says select, and this asterisk means all, select all of the fields, right? ID, first name, surname, age, all of the fields from this table, KB hit tracking, that have a type. So I don't have it here, but a type of 201576, and then have a prospect ID, that's what I use for student ID, of your ID. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this works, but this is what a SQL select statement looks like. So this statement goes in there and says, go to the KB underscore hit tracking table, give me all the records, all the fields from all the records that have a type, that in the type column have a value of 201576, and in the prospect ID column, which would be like right here, has a value of whatever your ID is. Let's say your ID is 1300. Well, the website knows what your ID is, so it's going to deliver to this statement your ID. That way, you're using the same code as Joe, another student, but it's going to deliver, instead of 1300, it's going to deliver whatever his ID is. All right, so now we have all the records that we want, and then the website serves that stuff up. Now, we're going to talk about that in a couple of lessons. But what I want you to understand is that all of the things that we enter into the website get stored in a table like this, and it specifies what the field name of that table is, so that we can then pull it back out and say either select all field names or select specific field names. But then the other piece is that when we create this where statement, we have to say where the column name of type has a value, the record in that table has a value of this, okay? All right, so right here, the other thing is that when you see right here this says ID, this is probably the unique ID that each record has, okay? It's called a primary key, and that means that I can just say, give me the number 2 record, and that will give me Tracy Smith. Or give me the record that has an ID of 13 and give me the Karen Jones. So when you then click edit on any of your elements, you're sending it you're sending the database the primary key, and you're saying, give me that record back, okay? All right, so now what I want you to do here is all we're going to do is just experiment a little bit with some SQL code. And I'm not giving you a lot of freedom here because I don't want you going into the database and grabbing a bunch of stuff. So I created a little generator here, and what you're going to do is click here. And what this does is it creates some standard code, right? These are the elements in my database. What should happen when you click this link is that the elements in your database should show up. And it gives you 3 choices. You can either say select all. Remember, the asterisk means all. And that just means give me all the fields in the database. Now, I'm only showing primary key and text 1 right here. But if I wanted to, because I've selected all, I can add whatever additional fields are. See, a lot of this stuff is behind the scenes stuff that I just want you to be aware of, but you're not in a situation. I can't have you in my database doing a bunch of stuff, all right? So select all. And when you click this, it just gives you your records. All right? Now, a couple of other things you can do. Now, part of why I'm not spending a lot of time on this, frankly, is that everything that I'm showing you here, in terms of like, if I was going to show you how to like filter the database to only show records that had started with the letter F, or I wanted you to order the database, like reorder it to go into alpha order or something like that. You know how to do all that stuff, probably with a little review, in JavaScript. So what we're really saying is we store stuff in the database and pull it back out into an array, and then we let our JavaScript generate the things that we want. The reason that the database is important for us is because we can store stuff there. And so later on, when you want the user to be able to store the results of their quiz, or when you want them to be able to identify that they want to save something, well, you can't really do that, and you can't really have different users interacting with each other unless you can store information in an external thing like a database. So that's, you know how to do all the filtering and sorting and all that stuff with JavaScript, but you gotta be able to save stuff somewhere. So that's what we're focusing on here in the next couple lessons, so that when you are creating apps, you're able to store stuff. All right. So another thing you can do though is you can do calculations. Again, you can probably do all this with. We can probably do all this with JavaScript. But I rather than selecting all the fields, I want to just select the maximum primary key results ID, and I call it something so that I can refer to it later. So you see now this shows up. That's my maximum ID. The other thing I can do is count. Again, something you can do with JavaScript. Gives me 2 records. Okay, so very simple. I just want you to honestly just be aware of that there's a database behind there, and that we can use these select statements in order to pull. That we use these select statements in order to pull records out. Primarily because I want you to understand that when I'm generating records, when I'm building this database, it's pulling stuff out of a date. When I'm generating this website, it's pulling stuff out of the database. And tomorrow or in the next lesson, I'm going to show you just how I did this, for instance. Right? It pulled the records out of the database, but how did it, serve it up like this? And that's the logic that supports your array. Okay? So all I want you to get out of this is that all the stuff that we enter in through the website gets stored in a database, which is a collection of tables, and most stuff gets stored in one table. And then that table is a collection of records or rows and columns or fields. And then we use these things, this select statement, to pull the information out of it the way we want. All right? So just play around with this a little bit. I'm not giving you a lot of tools because you're going to do all your real work in arrays in JavaScript. And then after you're done, click here and then just move final and to move on to the next lesson, which will be, I'm going to be showing you how I use this to create web pages.